Okay, so welcome to the lecture on cellular respiration. This is a lecture that I want you guys to connect back to your own personal metabolic rate. So the key with cellular respiration are those little mitochondria, the little bean-like structure, what we call the powerhouse of the cell. The more of those you have, the more pathways of cellular respiration you can run, and the more energy that you will have. So key things. What goes into cellular respiration and what comes out of it. So glucose, or we could use a chemical formula C6H12O6, oxygen, or O2, goes in if we're running aerobic respiration. And we're going to talk about this. There are two versions of cellular respiration, aerobic and anaerobic. We're going to focus on the aerobic because that's what we need, and that's what, without it, we're not going to survive. So we're going to primarily focus there. So glucose and oxygen go in, goes through a series of reactions, 4 different steps, and then it produces end products. Carbon dioxide, or CO2, dioxide, CO2, so carbon dioxide or CO2, water or H2O, heat, because we've talked about the laws of thermodynamics. Anytime you convert energy, you produce heat. So glucose is getting converted, and then ATP. Let me change the font so it's all in one line for us here. Okay, so that's what's going in, and that's what's coming out of cells, or mitochondria specifically, when they go through cellular respiration. Okay, now the key ingredient to start with is glucose. Glucose is the best. Ideally, we want glucose because it returns the most energy it's the easiest, the best, most efficient. Now, if we are eating a carbohydrate, when we eat carbohydrates, if you guys hopefully remember this from the food chapter, carbohydrates give us 4 calories of energy for every gram of carbohydrate. Okay? But that is the focus of a carbohydrate. That is why we eat them, is to get energy from them. So you eat glucose, boom, instantly into the system. Now, if you eat that muffin up there, a complex carb, you have to digest it all the way down to glucose in order for it to work. So the key with the carbs, the size of the carb, it has to be reduced down to glucose level for it to go into the cell, for it to diffuse into the cell, and in order for it to turn into those end products. Size is everything when we talk about cellular respiration. So the key is taking the molecule of potential energy and just breaking it down and making it smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller to ultimately give us ATP. If we start with fat, fat actually gives us 9 calories of energy for every gram of fat that we consume. So we get a lot more energy. But the challenge with fat, some of the end products, the byproducts, plus it's more important to use fat to build cell membranes and do the other things fat's supposed to do instead of using it for energy. And then proteins give us the same number of calories that the carbohydrates do. Give us about 4 calories of energy for every gram of protein. But really, we don't want to be burning protein to make energy. We want that protein to go towards cell structures, to go towards enzymes, to build our immune system, our hair, our fingernails, etc. You can often tell when somebody's burning protein for energy because the end product, it gives off different end products, and I'll show you this at the end of the lecture here, at the end of all the lectures for cell respiration. That's when people get that bad breath because they're burning protein to make energy, and one of the byproducts coming off is that ammonia, and that's what you smell when they breathe, is the ammonia. So you can tell if somebody's on the South Beach diet or Atkins diet, or oh, let's go on to this whatever crazy diet where you're eating primarily protein, you can tell you're not supposed to try to use protein for energy. Carbs are not bad. They are a great source of energy. The problem usually lies in most people, we overconsume. We need X amount of calories a day, and we eat more than we need, and then, oh, why can't I lose weight? Because you consumed 3,500 calories worth of food and you only burned 2,500, so you have an excess of 10,000 calories sitting in your body. Now, if you can increase your metabolic rate, maybe your natural metabolism will burn 3,500 calories, so then you can consume 3,500 and not gain weight. Okay, so anytime we are active, and it doesn't have to be bobsledding, it doesn't have to be speed skating, it doesn't have to be walking and running or doing any kind of activity like that. Just sitting, your heart's active and beating, your brain is shooting impulses, reading this lecture, your body is active, you're burning calories. We need millions and millions and millions of ATP every single second for our muscle cells to function. Okay, so millions of ATP. So the goal is, for us at least, we want to run aerobic respiration because it gives us the maximum return on ATP. If we shift over and go into anaerobic, we still make ATP, but it's just minimal amounts, and it's not enough for our bodies to function and survive. Okay, so whenever we start cellular respiration, okay, so cellular respiration is a big term here, big category, the overarching idea. Cellular respiration, it begins with the step called glycolysis. Okay, so glycolysis is the first step of cellular respiration. And we're going to focus on using glucose, going through the pathway with glucose. Okay, so you're starting out with this molecule of glucose during cellular respiration. And glycolysis will literally just rip it in half. So now you have two smaller pieces. Those smaller pieces are what we call pyruvates. Okay? So pyruvates are just glucose ripped in half. But in order to do this, you have to invest into this pathway. It's going to cost you 2 ATP. So there's an investment cost of this pathway. So there's 2 ATP going in. So you got to spend some energy to be able to start breaking glucose in half. But the really nice thing is you actually got back from glycolysis 4 ATP. Now remember, our goal of all of this is to produce as much ATP as possible. Okay, so do the math. You spent 2, you got back 4. If you repay yourself the 2 that you spent, you've still gained 2 ATP. And we're not a room here. Okay, that's supposed to be 2 ATP down there. Okay, so think about this like an investment. You walk into the gas station and say, hey, I'm going to buy a lottery ticket. You spent $2. Scratch them off. You just won $4. Great. Okay, so you won $4. Pay back yourself your original 2. You get $2 extra in your hands from when you started the day. That's great. That's a good investment. But 2 ATP is not enough. That's not enough to sustain life. So what we need to do is figure out how can we turn those 2 ATP into more. Can we make more out of it? So the other thing that we get that I want to make sure we mention when we run glycolysis are these things called NADH. Now NADH is very similar to the wheelbarrow we saw back in the plant. So if you remember photosynthesis, we talked about the little wheelbarrow called NADPH. Oh, this is supposed to be NADH. NADH. This is our wheelbarrow. So during glycolysis, we actually get two of those, two little wheelbarrows. We gain 2 ATP and we have 2 wheelbarrows. So again, dumb gas station analogy, you scratched off your ticket. On the tickets you scratched off, you won $4 and you won 2 more tickets. Pretty sweet deal. I want to scratch those other tickets off. What do I get for those? That's what we're going to do with the NADH, is we're going to, in a sense, cash those in later. Okay, so this is glycolysis. This is the first step. This is happening outside in the cell. This is within the cytoplasm of the cell. Gotta find a better way to write this. Okay, so that's supposed to say cytoplasm of the cell. All right, so now, if oxygen is present in large enough quantities, okay, so for us it means take a big breath in, oxygen is diffused down into your bloodstream, your red blood cells, provided they have the right shape, are carrying that oxygen over to every single cell in the body. The oxygen is diffusing into the cells, and at the cellular level, this is where this process is happening. Cellular respiration does not mean you're breathing. It means your cells are making energy. Okay, so I want to stress that. It is your cell making energy, not, oh, breathing, respiration, my lungs. Every single cell of the body that contains mitochondria performs cellular respiration. All right, so if you just took a big breath and you have enough oxygen, we're now going to go to step 2. So if oxygen is present, we're going to run the aerobic pathway. So remember, we had glucose that got split into these things called pyruvates. Step 2, excuse me, is what we call the pyruvate conversion. This is going to happen in the cytoplasm / mitochondria. Okay, the goal here is to take the pyruvates, bust them up, make them smaller, so that way they fit into the mitochondria. So this is kind of crossing from the cytoplasm through the mitochondrial membrane. All right, so what goes in? 2 pyruvates, and then this enzyme, or 2 of these enzymes called CoA enzymes. So I'm going to label that. That's an enzyme. And when we do this, we rip it apart, and we pop it apart. We knock off carbons, and that's going to form some carbon dioxide. So actually I should go back up here. Pow, there's some carbon dioxide's coming off. We're going to knock off some hydrogens. That's going to give us 2 more of those wheelbarrows we talked about. There's our NADH. And then our CO2s. And the smaller molecule. The smaller molecule here, this thing here is called the acetyl-CoA. Alright, so this again is trying to get it small enough so it fits into the mitochondria. It's all a size issue, guys. Size dictates diffusion. If you're too big, you don't diffuse. If you're starch, you don't come into the cell to begin glycolysis. You have to be digested down to glucose size. If you're too big, you don't get into the mitochondria. Because remember, the mitochondria is inside of the cell. So to get into the mitochondria, you got to be even smaller than what it required to get into the cell. All right, so this is our second step if we're running aerobic respiration. What we'll talk about in the next lecture is going to step 3, step 4, and the massive amount of ATP we're hopefully going to be making from aerobic respiration.